I'm glad to do this. It's an annual thing that I look forward to every April to be able to share back with the community what we've been learning, adjustments that we've been making based on your input and feedback, and hopefully being able to continuously, reciprocally, back and forth, learn from each other and shape autism and the future of the research that we're doing to answer your questions. Next slide. So some of you, I know it's been a while since you joined. Some of you, in fact, even 8 years or more, if you can believe that. And so I wanted to take some time just as a brief refresher, next slide, to remind people of what Spark's about. So Spark actually stands for something: Simon's Foundation Powering Autism Research for Knowledge. That is, that we're trying to collectively work together to be able to answer many of the questions you and others have about autism. In doing this, we know that autism is not a single condition. It's many, many different wonderful people, and to make sure that everyone is represented, whether they're male or female, whether they're young or old, whether they live in a city or the country, wherever it is, we want to make sure that everyone is represented. And we know that everyone's experience is a little bit different. And so we're stronger together. In doing this, we've been able to accumulate very large numbers of individuals working together. And although we've learned an enormous amount over the last 9 years, we still have gaps in our knowledge. There are things that we still don't understand. As we do this, I'm really committed to making sure that you're getting something out of this. You individually, as a Spark participant, I want you to learn about yourselves, about your family as you're going through this journey, because I want you to have information that will empower you to be your best self, to have your family member be their best self. And as we're doing this, we do this by individually giving you information back that we hope is helpful, and also collectively. As we're doing this, we know that numbers matter, and putting those numbers together is helpful. To say, and I know this is a point of confusion sometimes, we have what I call Spark Central. That is what we do with I and my team and the Simons Foundation that helps us to keep this all together. But we also have researchers around the world who have what we call research match studies. And I'll go into that in more detail. I'm going to share back today results of both of those types of information. That is information coming back from Spark Central, but also information coming back through research studies. As we're going forward, next slide, we're doing this all to be able to, at the end of the day, improve the lives of individuals with autism. In doing this, we may be able to understand for individual people what an underlying driver is, what a contributor is to why they got autism. And the reason for understanding that is we may be able to have greater specificity about things that are going to be helpful on that journey. And that's why we share that information back. As we're going through this, we are being able to, as I said, making it easier for researchers to do really good research so that they can come up with answers that may help you individually or help your next door neighbor or someone else at school. Next slide. So where are we? Let me give you an update in terms of where we are with the study. We've done this in partnership with what I consider to be 30 different sites, actually a little more than 30 now, around the United States, who I think are the very best individual clinicians to be able to support individuals and their families with autism. So it is a collective group of individuals, as I said, east to west, north to south, all working together to be able to make this work. Collectively, we have over 380,000 participants in the United States, and that includes 153,000 people with autism. Most of those are children, 123,000 are children, but we also have, in a wonderful way, the life course represented. So we have over 30,000 adults. And just for those of you to remember, to be in Spark, the requirement is for the individual to have autism, but there's no age limit whatsoever. So we take young, we take olds, we take males, we take females, we take everyone. Within that, we also have family members. And so family members are an important part of this journey and understanding. And so we have them represented as well. In doing this, we have many people also in Research Match. So Research Match, as I said, is a process by which researchers can put in an application. We have members of your community, members of the Spark community, who help us make that research even better they give input to the researchers to make it more understandable for individuals with autism, make sure that this is something that's going to be valuable to the community, and then send out invitations to members of the Spark community, participants in Spark. Within doing that, you can choose your own adventure, is the way I describe it. You don't have to do any of the research match studies that you're invited to. You can do all of them. You can pick and choose. You can decide how busy or free you are and on that particular time and decide whether or not you want to do that. Through that process, over 66,000 individuals have been part of research match studies from Spark, and that's helped over 300 scientists be able to put that together already in over 180 scientific papers. So this is not just information that people gather and then stick away in a drawer or put on their computer. This is information that's getting out there to the scientific and medical community and you. And today I'm going to help you understand what's been going on to be able to move things forward. And the types of studies that have done have been really quite variable. Everything from understanding autism over the lifespan, one thing that I think is really, really important, to understanding other features that can co-occur with autism and understand some of the differences that we see between males and females. Next slide. So as we're doing this, I also think it's important to be able to give information back to individual families. As I said, if there is something that we learn about you specifically, we try and give that information back in a responsible way. That's really important to me, that it's in a way that you can understand it, digest it, and integrate it into the rest of your life. So in doing this, as an example, not you don't have to participate in the genetic portion of Spark, but for those individuals who do, those individuals who have given us, for instance, a saliva sample, and we've processed and looked for a genetic cause of autism. I'll talk more about this later, but about 10% of our families have gotten back an individual genetic diagnosis for autism. Within that, and I'll go through this more later, we've also had individuals be able to learn with us through webinars like this. And so we've had just under 100 webinars to present this information back. And I'm very pleased that many of our researchers themselves have been speaking directly with you about what they've been learning. And I hope that's been helpful. In addition, we have write-ups. So even though everything's not a webinar, we have some write-ups in our newsletter every month and other formats to be able to give you multiple ways of learning. Some people learn by watching or listening. Other people learn better by reading. So we try and have something for everyone. Next slide. So as I've been talking about, within this, autism is not the same thing for everyone. But we do notice that there are certain things that tend to be recurring themes. Not everyone has every one of these other associated conditions, but we do notice that many people have issues with sleep. And sleep is a tough thing. When you get up, when you don't get a good night's sleep, it sometimes is hard to be able to learn the next day, to focus, to pay attention, to be your best self. Sometimes you get a little bit edgy. So sleep is a core thing that's important, and it's especially important when you don't get a good night's sleep. There can be issues associated with attention or attention deficit hyperactivity. Other issues in terms of coordination of movement, we call those motor challenges or movement challenges. Others that have issues in terms of feeling sad, feeling depressed, or feeling anxious, feeling nervous when things change, especially. And so these are other things that can be associated, not with everyone with autism, but in certain people's, and it may even change over the life course. It may change based on circumstance, may change based on new challenges or new opportunities, and may change in terms of as things around you change. If a family moves, changes location, that may also be a difference and a stressor on how things are going. Next slide. As we've been talking about this all along, many of you ask me the question, why? Why does my son or daughter have autism? Why do I have autism? Can you help us understand those causes? Not surprisingly, because there are many different sort of individuals, there are many different causes. And I'll be honest, we don't know most of them. I'll be very frank. We're still very much in the process of learning. We're gradually making progress, so I'm very happy about that, but it is slow. And it's not slow because we're not trying. I want to say that you have literally an army of doctors and researchers and research staff that are all trying to figure this out, but it's complicated especially because of this heterogeneity question or different people having different answers. I am going to talk a little bit about the genetics today because that's one thing you often ask us about, and that's why I'm focusing on it. But not to say that genetics is everything. And for many of you, we haven't found a genetic answer. I'll split it out into there are genetic factors that are brand new in the person with autism. That is, they don't run in families. And then there are genetic factors that do run in the family. Those are inherited. And that's what's on the left of the slide. I know many people are wondering, well, maybe it's not all in the genes. Maybe there are other factors. And I think that's a reasonable guess, a reasonable hypothesis to think that that's the case. Exactly what those factors are and in whom they are important factors, I think, is one of the things we're trying to figure out. Autism is fundamentally a developmental process. That is, that the brain is developing, and part of that development happens in utero while a mother is pregnant, and part of it continues to happen after a baby's born. And so I think many of us think that there are critical periods, important times when the brain is developing that may affect this process. And we think a lot about either before a baby's born or in the first few years of life while the brain is still developing, and what exactly those environmental factors or exposures are. Again, I don't entirely know, but a lot of people are working with us to try and figure this out. Next slide. When we do think about the genetics, this is a slide that we've used before, but just to say that all genetic factors are not the same. Some genetic factors are major contributors and, in fact, may increase the probability that someone has autism by even 100 times or 100-fold. So that's what I'm showing you on the left, one large genetic factor. Many times that genetic factor is new in the child with autism, but that's not the only genetic factor that can contribute. In some cases, there are inherited genetic factors, ones that get passed down either from father or mother, or sometimes both. They get passed down to a child, and oftentimes they don't have quite as strong an effect. They may increase the probability by something like 5 or 10-fold. And then on the right are what I think of as smaller factors, smaller genetic factors. Those are usually passed down from both the mother and the father, and those can be hundreds of genetic factors all working together. Any one genetic factor might increase the probability of autism by a very small amount, 1.1-fold, for instance. So not 100-fold, but 1.1, much smaller in terms of that effect. But when you put them all together in the right combination, that may also uh, affect the development of the brain. Next slide. So within this, I wanted to talk to you about some of those genetic results that we've been returning. So all told, at this point, we've tried to return results to about 2,700 individuals, and these are genetic results related to autism. If you haven't heard from us, we have been sending back messages. Sometimes a message says we haven't found a result, a genetic result yet. And I say yet because we continue to look back, even for people who may have had their sequencing done 5 years ago. We continue to look back and continue to search. And as more and more people become part of Spark, and as we have more people to help us recognize those genetic factors, sometimes we find something even years later. So as we're doing this, you might have received an email that says no genetic result yet, or you might have received an email from us that says, yes, we think we found something. We need you to go forward and contact us about learning about that information and setting up an appointment. The reason I mention this is that if you haven't been checking your email, that email that you use with us at registration is the main way that we reach back out to you. And some of you may have either moved or you're using a different email address. And if you haven't heard from us, it might be why. It might be that old email address. So there are a couple different genetic types of variants that we see. Some are relatively large. So when we think about states around the United States, might be a large state like California or Texas. Other states are smaller. They're like Rhode Island. They're much smaller in size. And so on the right are genetic factors that happen to be larger in terms of real estate, copy number variants or aneuploidy or whole chromosome differences. The ones on the left, or single nucleotide variants, are more like Rhode Island. They're smaller in terms of size. As we see that, in some cases, we know if this got transmitted from a parent or not. And in some cases, we don't know because we don't have both parents to check. So within this, you can see that most of the genetic findings we're seeing are small in terms of size. They may be only a single alphabet letter, but they may be big in terms of impact. They may be that hundredfold increased probability of autism. And as we see this, many of these, like I said, can be inherited from either the mother or the father. Next slide. To show you what's been happening over time, it took us some while to ramp up and to recognize these things. So this is showing you how many results we've returned over time. 2019, 2020, we were sort of getting it together, and then there's an explosion in 2023 and 2024 as we had more results to return. We recognized them. We had all the processes in place. And 25 is smaller simply because it's earlier in the year, and we're expecting this number to increase significantly as that year goes on. The one other thing you'll see here is in the yellow block are these secondary findings. And you might say, what's that about? Those are things that are genetic that are not related to autism, but there's a group of very thoughtful doctors and even ethicists who have been thinking about genetic information that's contained within that exome, that genetic information we looked at, and that it's important for your health, not necessarily related to autism whatsoever, but it might be related to, for instance, a chance of developing breast cancer or colon cancer. Information that we felt that it is very important for you to be able to know that information to take care of yourself or take care of your family. You don't have to know that information, but if you do, we've been supporting returning that to you. And all of these returns, I will say, done with a genetic counselor and done in a clinical laboratory that we support at Spark Central. So we pay for all of that. It costs you nothing as a participant. Next slide. So I want to give a shout out to Jessica Wright, Dr. Pamela Feliciano, both of them doctors actually, who are on our Spark team, who have really done a great job in terms of helping other scientists understand how important it is to be able to do what we've done and to be able to help them do things similarly. So they've written about this process in terms of returning results. And the other part that I wanted to share with you is what the characteristics are of individuals who receive those genetic results, where we found something genetic and identifiable. And it's not everyone, and some of these characteristics may help you understand better what we're learning. So the first thing you can see here is overall 8.6% of these individuals in Spark have had returns at the time that we published this particular paper. But interestingly enough, it's not the same for males to females. And in Spark, we have many more males than females because autism is more common in males. But for the genetic results that we returned, these were more commonly returned in individuals who are female. So within this, it is more common to have something we recognize, at least right now, if you're a female with autism. Next slide. We also looked at much of the information that you filled out on questionnaires, helping to understand the totality of you. So not just that individuals have autism, but understanding other factors, understanding if they might have other uh, challenges in terms of the way the brain is functioning or cognition, if there might be learning disabilities, problems of movement, coordination of movement, or motor delay or delays in walking, for instance. Problems that might be problems in terms of toileting, problems with gaining weight, head size, how tall you were, whether or not someone had seizures or hearing problems or vision problems. So all of these factors, in fact, anyone who had any of those multitude of things that I just described, there was an increased probability that you would have one of these genetic diagnoses that we returned. And in fact, shown in the graph on the right, for individuals, if they had not just one factor, but the more of those factors you had, so if you had two factors or three of those factors on that checklist, the more of those factors you had, the higher the probability that we would identify one of these genetic factors and have that ready to return to you. So you can understand, get a better sense if you're sitting out there and you've said, well, they told me that there's no genetic answer yet. I wonder if they're going to ever find anything. So if you start going down that checklist and if you think about the person with autism in your family, whether they're male, female, if they have any of the factors on this checklist, you'll get a better sense. I do think that we're more likely to find our next results to return in individuals with similar characteristics, although we realize that that is changing over time as well. Next slide. One of the things we're realizing, as I said, is that some of these are passed down from parents. So sometimes they're passed down from mother, sometimes from a father, and shown on the left are genetic variants that are passed down versus on the right, genetic variants that are not passed down or so-called de novo. And what's shown on the x-axis or along the bottom are characteristics of the parents. So individual parent characteristics like autism, I'm sorry, starting on the left, ADHD or attention issues, autism, developmental issues, anxiety issues, schizophrenia, seizures. And what you can see comparing the left to the right is that for those genetic variants that are passed down on the left, we see a higher frequency of attention issues in parents where these are passed down than parents on the right side on that right graph where those are de novo genetic variants. And what that means is that to me, when we see that, that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes parents share some characteristics. They might be a characteristic like autism, or they might be a different characteristic like attention issues, but sometimes there are differences. And frankly, in speaking with some of you where we've returned some of this information, what's been reassuring to me is to see that parents that do sometimes share some features with their child, how, in some ways, amazing that is that they can help their child navigate some of the challenges that they face. They've been there, they've done that, they've figured out ways of being able to work around, adapt to, or use supports to be able to achieve what they needed to. And being able to understand and put themselves in the shoes of their child has been enormously powerful and beneficial. And so, with this, again, helpful to be able to understand and relate. Next slide. As we're doing this, we're putting all of those pieces together. So we're putting together information that you've been telling us about behavioral concerns, information about medical aspects, information about genetic information, and we're putting this all together so that we can race forward in terms of as quickly as we can learning together. Next slide. So, in thinking about this, I now want to switch and talk about really what's not my research, just to be very transparent. And I'm going to try and make sure I give credit where credit is due, but to the many researchers who have been using Spark. Next slide. In doing this, I'll try and understand some of the research that they've done as well as the context of why they've been doing it. And I won't have time to call everyone out, but I've tried to show you pictures and mention the names of the researchers here, and then also have a reference to the actual study so that if anyone wants to do a deeper dive, they certainly can. So let me start at the beginning. I'm going to do this a little bit over the life course. We put these in order so that you could think about an individual growing up. And this is starting out with younger children. And so I don't know if any of you have younger children or can think back in terms of what things were like earlier. But sometimes for younger children, and when I mean younger, I'm talking about ages 2 to 5, there may be problems in terms of temper tantrums. And it's somewhat challenging because to a certain extent, all children have tantrums. But some children have more tantrums. Some children have more difficulty being able to regulate their emotions. They may overflow. They may not know how to hold it in or control it. And all of us feel that at some time. But with younger children, it's hard to know sometimes, is this someone who's going to have this as a longer term problem? And it can be disruptive, I'll be honest. So it can be disruptive, for instance, in the school setting. And I've seen children who have been kicked out of kindergarten, as an example, because of some of these issues. And with this, on the other hand, I do think this is an incredibly important time where we can have opportunities to adjust, to be able to understand and help children adapt to that and be able to really set them on a trajectory more in terms of health and adaptability and being able to just deal with emotions sometimes in more positive ways. But the question is, do we have ways of knowing these differences, knowing about who's just a toddler who's doing a regular tantrum versus one who might be having greater problems that might suggest that they need additional help? So this team actually used Spark again in the research match to be able to understand what was going on for those young children and develop a tool to differentiate between just regular children going through regular tantrums versus those, for instance, with autism and understand how to do this in a very efficient, effective, and accurate way. And they developed a screening tool. And they had one that was more detailed with 15 different items, another tool that's kind of the skinnier version of that with 7 different items. And with both of those tools, in fact, they could tell that they could begin to differentiate between those individuals. And I think this is really, really important to be able to help our young children. And especially, I worry that there may be stigma attached with our young children that's not deserved. And so, understanding this and being able to help give those children the supports early on, I do think helps to get them started on the right foot. Next slide. Going a little bit older, looking at children that are ages 6 to 12, some of you may realize that some individuals with autism have difficulty with language. Language primarily in terms of speaking, in terms of being able to say the words, say them clearly, using complex sentence structure. That may be more challenging for some individuals. And so part of the question is that a generalizable thing in terms of everything, in terms of hearing sounds, processing sounds, understanding sounds, or where exactly is the issue when it comes to that language? And I think this is something that I certainly have observed that comprehensive ability, the ability to listen and understand, much, much greater than expression or the speech or the language coming out. And so breaking this down into separate pieces, for instance, these are individuals who are typically developing in blue on the top compared to individuals with autism on the bottom. This is the graph on the right. And being able to have different types of sound. So starting all the way on the right, tones, or in other words, when you might hear a musical tone or music or sound, that not much difference actually in terms of individuals processing those basic sounds. Images, visually being able to see things, some difference. You can see that those two dots then higher for the typically developing than for autism, but still some overlap and much closer together. So again, being able to take in the world through images better. Now starting to get to closer to language, either a syllable or a letter, greater divergence, greater differences between that. And so we can start to understand some of those differences. But the part for me that's important is that it's not everything where there are problems or difficulties in terms of taking in the world around you and being able to process and understand that. And so knowing that can help us to use different alternative means also to help individuals learn, acquire those skills, and understand the world around them. Next slide. So this is also now looking at children ages a little bit older, but 6 to 17. And in thinking about this, again, as you think about emotional regulation, sometimes those emotions can overflow. And in some cases, that can be perceived as aggression, sometimes frustration, sometimes emotional dysregulation, but can overflow in a way. And if we look at older children in terms of how that overflows and how those uh, behaviors are perceived, it's important to be able to understand some of those differences. So the bottom line is that when individuals, young individuals with autism were quote unquote aggressive, mostly that was in terms of being saying something or making a sound, but it was verbal much more so than physical. So it wasn't necessarily hitting or punching or doing anything destructive to another person or property, but it was screaming or yelling or being able to get it out that way. Importantly, though, what things were associated with having more of those behaviors? Well, it was things, I'm coming back to the sleep issue, poor sleep. So, as we talked about, better night sleep, better in terms of just being able to think straight and just feel better during the day. Also, there were some family factors, perhaps not surprising. When there's stress in the family, either caregiver stressed or siblings, kind of poking at each other, siblings that are especially some rivalry or don't understand or get frustrated with each other. But sometimes those family interactions can provoke these things. And so, again, if you're thinking about ways to intervene or intercede, I hope these are helpful suggestions to understand. Next slide. When we think about this, there are also, again, thinking about some of the issues with emotional dysregulation. In this particular study, in individuals aged 3 to 18, looking at some of those patterns about what's associated. And in fact, in this case, perhaps not surprisingly, anxiety oftentimes associated with that emotional dysregulation. And even in some cases, higher anxiety levels associated with self-injurious behavior and repetitive behavior. And again, this particular study done in individuals with intellectual disabilities specifically. And in those individuals, I think sometimes the anxiety comes when things are new or different or unexpected. And again, I think that can lead to some of the problems where there's emotional overflow that goes with that. Next slide. Um, Thinking about this and thinking about individuals again with lower IQ and some of the challenges for those individuals, um, really is thinking about quality of life and what individuals may have challenges with. Individuals who are able to connect, it's really important, is the bottom line. And so, how they're connecting socially, how they're able to spend time with family, with friends, whether it's video games, whether it's talking, whether it's emailing, but however it is that individuals are able to connect, enormously important for those individuals in terms of their quality of life. Lower depression, just improved quality of life overall for individuals who are able to connect, meaningful, meaningfully collect, and for these individuals who are adolescents and young adults, age 15 to 25, especially important. And especially important, I say, as these individuals also go through transitions, life transitions, where some of that routine may be changing, a very important dynamic change during the life course. Next slide. Looking at this and thinking about practical, this is, I hope, helpful and hopeful. Practical things about interventions that can be done and things that are working. Again, every single one of these studies that I'm mentioning, done by research match investigators, inviting people in Spark. So in these activities, these were activities that an intervention was creative movement. So basically yoga type or exercise types of classes and individuals getting to move their bodies and being active. And in doing so in two different ways. One way in which this was done online, and the other way in which this was done in person, and being able to do this in partnership with a parent. And in doing this, I would say that this was helpful in terms of being able to do this in either way. But the bottom line, this is my interpretation, by the way, is that as parents were engaged in the process and when they were engaging with their child, they there was more positive interaction that came from that. It was more successful as an intervention. And so depending on the format for doing that, that was more successful largely because of that interaction and that intervention that ensued with that. And you can imagine that as you're doing this together, maybe being able to demonstrate some of the activities, some of the different, again, movements, being able to help position the body in doing this could be a very positive bonding experience and way of being able to help a young person. And so that's, I think, a very positive way of looking at this. And although there might be some formats little bit more positive in terms of whether it's in person or online. My own personal takeaway is it can be helpful either way. Next slide. In doing this, again, this is a slightly different age group, but our adolescents, age 11 to 16, what I take as very helpful from this is that even a single session can be helpful for an adolescent to be able to have someone they can connect with and talk through and talk things out. And so this may not need to be extended over long periods of time, multiple sessions with someone who can provide mental health support, but even single sessions help in terms of that mental health. And so going forward, I do think this is great in terms of sometimes the school setting, sometimes community or youth or church settings to do this. It can also be professionals to do this. But the good news is that I think some of those even infrequent touch points can be very, very helpful for young people in this critical stage of their lives. Next slide. We're very interested in Spark in being able to make sure everyone can be part of Spark. We're not saying anyone has to be part of Spark, let me be clear, but we want to make sure that we remove barriers so that it's easy for everyone to be able to be included. And we realize the more that we do this, that there are different barriers for different people. And so we've tried to be really thoughtful in listening to the community, whether it's older individuals, and when I say older, I mean greater than the age of 40, whether it's individuals with very young children who might have different challenges, where people live, what languages they speak. And in doing so, and again, I want to put a shout out to our Spark sites. Some of our Spark sites have been real leaders in doing this. We've again realized that there are differences across our community. And as we're doing it, and I'm not saying we're perfect, but we've definitely been one by one addressing in order of priority the things that are most important and I think most impactful in doing that. Next slide. We've looked at individuals, and this is getting more to our adults now with autism and understanding some of the mental health issues over time. And with this, one of the things that I definitely realize, and I alluded to, is that times can be hard. Individuals may feel down, they may feel have certain challenges, and we see that individuals who have structure, who have meaning, I guess is the way I'm going to describe it. And I think it's true for all of us. If there's meaning in what we do, that can be in the form of structure with day-to-day activities and meaning in work, meaning in school. But individuals who have those types of things that are important for meaning in their lives actually have less depression over time. And so again, as we think about this and think about individuals in terms of being able to find that meaning, I think it becomes really important as individuals are finding themselves during adolescence and young adults. Next slide. This is now, and I'm coming towards the end of this particular segment, but this is now thinking about our older individuals with autism. And as I said earlier, we take everyone of all ages, and it's incredibly important to me that we're representative of individuals along that lifespan. We have fewer individuals who are in this particular study. The group was age 40 to 83. We have fewer individuals proportionately who are in this older age group, but it doesn't mean they're any less important. I think the challenges can be different across the lifespan. And one of the things that I know many of you wonder is for my child, I wonder what their lives are going to be like in 40, 50, 60 years. And so we're trying to look at this, not to say that across these generations, life will be exactly the same. But if we can forecast or try to understand what the future might be, then we can know what types of questions we need to ask and what preparation we might need to do now. So some of you may have heard about a condition called Parkinsonism. It's a movement issue. It's problems in terms of individuals move differently. They may be slower in terms of their movements. They may have difficulty planning some of their movements. And that may sound like a theme because I've been talking about movement a couple other times during the webinar today. And individuals in this particular part of life, Parkinson's in general doesn't start in young children, it starts in older individuals. So people think about that as something that happens as people will say degenerative, but something that happens as older individuals start to lose some ability or some things in terms of their brain start to act differently. And so we see some of these same features that we see with Parkinsonism in older individuals with autism. And again, here it comes, sleep. Sleep is different in those individuals, issues with poor sleep. There may also be problems related to depression in those individuals. And so as we see this, one of the themes I want you to understand is that the brain is complicated, but many different manifestations that we see in terms of the brain from behavior like autism, from how we're feeling to how our body is moving. These things are interconnected. And again, we're trying to learn this across that lifespan. Next slide. So let me just briefly, next slide, just go through a tiny bit more detail to make sure the research match portion of things and some of what we're doing in Spark Central makes sense. So, as we're doing this, like I said, we have no intention of stopping Research Match. In fact, we're going to continue going forward. We provide the same free infrastructure to researchers. I want to reassure you that when we do this, we act as what I hope is a trusted partner in the middle. So these researchers don't know when they start these studies, they don't know who you are. We protect your privacy. We have had no data hacks in terms of any of our information, so your data are secure. And when researchers come to Spark to say that they have a research match study to do, we are the ones that send out that invitation to you. Those researchers don't know who you are. We send the invitation to you, and you're in the driver's seat. You're the one that gets to decide whether or not you want to participate in any of those studies. And if you do, then whether this is done anonymously so that they don't know who you are, or whether this is something where they need to know who you are so that, for instance, they can have you come in and do something, for instance, at their hospital. As we do this, I'm not sure if you've logged in recently, but if you've logged in to your dashboard, you can see various things. You can see copies of some of the instruments you may have filled out online. You may be able to see your progress. You may be able to get updates depending on where you are in the study, but that'll give you an update on things. And you can always send an email to us if you've got a question. So we're happy. We've got someone basically able to pick up the phone, someone able to answer your email questions. But if you get stuck on something, certainly let us know. Within doing all of this, everything you do is always voluntary. So if there's anything you don't feel comfortable doing, if you don't feel comfortable doing the genetics, no problem. You get to choose your own adventure as you go through the Spark research study. Next slide. When you do this, as I said, we're all connected with everything through that initial email that you give to us. So that initial email is important in doing this. If we give you study updates, as we're sending you information about the newsletter, as we're giving you invitations to the research match, that's through that email address that you've given us. So if there's a problem with that email address, let us know, and we'll give an update or correction if we need to. As we do this, we try and, I'm going to use the term leverage, but use the investment that you've made in Spark and multiply it. So you only have to contribute once by doing a survey online, and we want to have as many people use the data as possible to be able to be creative, to come up with new perspectives, to come up with new answers for you. But you only have to do something once. There could be 100 scientists all being able to work for you and help you by using your information, but you only have to do it once. And as I said, those researchers never know who you are. As we do this, where it's appropriate, we'll give the information about you back to you, or at the very least about the community back to the community as a whole. Next slide. So as we're doing this, we are sort of not stopping down. We are not slowing down as we're going forward. We're committed to, as I said, being able to make this, number one, transparent. There's nothing that we're hiding in terms of what we're doing with the information that you've provided. We're trying to make it safe and secure and be able to make sure that you're able to benefit as much as possible from all of this because we want to be able to come up with answers. Truly, truly, truly. I know every single day my inbox gets flooded with people with questions, and I feel great when I can answer the questions, and I feel like I'm struggling, to be honest, when I don't have those answers. And I want to be able to give you all the answers that you have to be able to help navigate your lives. Most importantly, so that we can make everyone be the best version of themselves as we go forward. Next slide. As we're doing this, we are continuing, as I said, to be able to not just help people across the country, but also think about having people that are in Spanish and in English and be able to make sure that this is a study that more people can do. Being able to make sure that people who have invested as children or as minors under the age of 18 can continue participating after they hit 18, where technically they go from their parent consenting to them being in the study to they themselves being able to be direct participants. And so we want to support everyone as we do that as well. And as I said, we'll continue doing what we can in terms of understanding the genetic information and looking at it over time and returning that information, not just about autism, but things that might be life-threatening or very impactful conditions, because we want you to be here to be able to benefit from what we're learning. So, with that, I thank you for joining us. And this will be part of what we do, as I said, every year. We like to share this information back, and we hope that you're all doing well.